The neon sign above the data center flickered. It cast a jagged, stuttering light across the rows of server racks. Inside the room, the low, steady hum of cooling fans provided the only rhythm. Sarah sat motionless, her eyes locked onto the monitor. A red bar flashed across the screen, pulsing in time with the flickering light. The cost of compute had spiked 40% in just 1 hour. The numbers did not just shift, they bled into the red. She felt the heat radiating from the racks intensify as the load hit maximum. Every millisecond of delay now translated into thousands of dollars lost. She reached for the trade button. Her finger hovered, then pressed down hard. The interface registered the input. She was not trading stocks or bonds. She was bidding for the raw power required to keep her project breathing. The red bar continued to climb, relentless and aggressive. She watched the order book scroll, each line representing a frantic scramble for hardware. She had to secure the capacity before the market locked her out completely. The screen refreshed, confirming the trade. She inhaled slowly, but the tension in the room remained thick. The race for survival had only just begun. The trade went through, but the market was far larger than one transaction. This was the world's first futures market for AI computing power. A new, volatile frontier where logic was written in electricity. Over the last year, $10 trillion had surged into the sector. Energy grids were strained to their absolute limits to feed the demand. Hardware foundries operated at triple capacity, yet the hunger remained insatiable. This capital was not looking for growth, it was looking for a hedge. Every dollar was a bet against the scarcity of silicon. The scale was staggering. It moved like a tide, sweeping through infrastructure and power plants alike. Investors were no longer satisfied with software performance. They were buying the physical capacity to think. The entire industrial landscape had tilted. Energy was no longer just a utility. It was the primary feedstock for the next generation of intelligence. As the global figures updated, the sheer weight of that $10 trillion became palpable. It was a massive, shifting force that dwarfed individual startups. The industry had become a closed-loop system where hardware was the currency and electricity was the fuel. This was the new architecture of value. Sarah pulled her focus back from the global numbers to her own terminal. Her startup was deep into the training phase of a massive language model. Without a steady stream of guaranteed hardware, the entire project would stall and die within 3 weeks. She refreshed the order book. The screen lit up with new, predatory bids. Banks and tech giants were sweeping the supply, clearing out the H100 chips as fast as they appeared on the exchange. The volatility was brutal. Each time she tried to lock in a rate, a larger player moved in with a higher bid, snatching the capacity away. She watched her project's progress bar crawl forward, stalled by a lack of processing power. The pressure was physical. It tightened her grip on the mouse. She needed more silicon to stay relevant, but the giants were starving the secondary market. She clicked again, attempting to outmaneuver a firm that had 10 times her capital. The system showed the trade pending. Her breath hitched. If this bid failed, her team would lose their window for the quarter. She was fighting a war of attrition against titans, and the silicon was slipping through her fingers. Across the city, far above the hum of cooling fans, David sat in a room of glass and silence. His office floor was empty, the lights dimmed to highlight only the glow of his multi-monitor setup. He did not care about language models or the nuances of neural networks. He tracked the index of GPU capacity with the clinical precision of a commodities broker. To David, compute was the new oil, and the pipeline was fundamentally broken. He watched the fluctuations on his dashboard, observing the desperate scramble of startups as mere data points in a larger, profitable trend. He opened a new position, selling a massive contract to a cloud provider at a premium. The transaction executed instantly. He leaned back, his eyes moving to a chart that mapped the global flow of hardware as if it were crude or grain. The market had shifted. It was no longer about providing a service. It was about controlling the physical means of production. He adjusted his settings, his movements efficient and devoid of hesitation. He was not building the future. He was extracting value from the infrastructure that allowed it to exist. He watched the numbers climb, satisfied by the cold, predictable logic of the trade. The volatility in the market turned violent. On every screen, the price of compute spiked in erratic, jagged waves. The pipeline for high-end chips was not just strained, it was fracturing under the weight of the demand. Every startup in the sector was now forced to abandon their core mission to focus on a new, desperate priority: managing a derivative strategy just to keep their servers powered for the next month. The air in the industry felt thin, suffocating, as if the oxygen of innovation were being pumped out of the room. Sarah watched the order book refresh, the spreads between the buy and sell prices widening into chasms. Small firms were dropping off the board, their access to silicon severed by the sudden, brutal inflation. It was no longer a race to build. It was a race to survive the impending collapse of the infrastructure supply chain. The uncertainty was absolute. Every trade carried the weight of a potential total shutdown. The system was eating itself, and those left in the game were forced to hedge their existence against the reality of a broken, unpredictable market. The pressure mounted, steady and relentless, as the supply of hardware vanished into the void. Sarah leaned into the glow of her monitor, the flickering light casting sharp shadows across her face. The dashboard hummed with the red pulses of failing availability. She watched the order book. Banks and tech giants were sweeping the remaining H100 chips off the market in seconds. Her project was weeks from total expiration unless she secured hardware. She hovered her finger over the trade button, her knuckles white. Suddenly, the spot price surged upward, the gap between her target and the market widening into a dangerous chasm. If she waited, the cost would be unsustainable. If she moved, she risked locking in a debt she might never recover from. Her breath hitched in the silence of the data center. The cooling fans roared in her ears, a constant, mechanical reminder of the scarcity. She did not hesitate. She slammed the key down, confirming the order for the next quarter. The screen flickered, processed, and shifted to a confirmation banner. The rate was locked. Her hands trembled as she pulled them back from the keyboard, the weight of the gamble settling in her chest. She had bet the entire future of her work on the scarcity of silicon. She watched the confirmation log finish, the transaction finalized, and exhaled, knowing she had bought herself time, but nothing more. Miles away, in a high-rise office overlooking the city, David watched the same data streams, but saw a different map. He did not care about the models or the code. He tracked the index of GPU capacity, the raw, unrefined power that kept the servers alive. To him, the screen was not a workspace. It was a ticker tape of a new industrial revolution. He watched the hardware supply chain buckle, and he saw the opportunity. Compute was no longer a service to be bought. It was the new oil, and the pipeline was shattered. He moved his cursor, selecting a massive contract held by a regional cloud provider. The market was officially shifting from a utility model to a brutal commodity trade. He clicked, selling the capacity at a premium that reflected the desperation of every startup on the board. The transaction went through in a fraction of a second, a digital handshake that finalized the transition. He leaned back, watching the numbers shift in real time. The infrastructure behind the innovation was now more valuable than the innovation itself. He had seen the trend clearly, and he had cashed in on the collapse. The shift was absolute. Every startup now required a derivative strategy to survive, and David sat at the center of the trade, watching the wealth of an entire industry flow through his hands. Back in the data center, the air remained stagnant, heavy with the hum of cooling systems. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the dashboard, watching the live ticker as it updated with erratic, sharp movements. The market was punishing. Outside observers were panic buying, driving the cost of compute capacity to levels that seemed disconnected from reality. She refreshed the page, the screen momentarily blank, then populated with the latest global spot price. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she compared the new data to her locked contract from earlier. The number was clear. Her secured rate sat exactly 20% below the current market value. The tension in her shoulders snapped. She had not just bought time, she had bought an edge. The runway was hers. She leaned back, the blue glow of the monitor washing over her, and watched the market continue to churn without her. She had navigated the volatility successfully. The startup was safe for another quarter, protected by the very numbers that had threatened to destroy it. She felt the weight of the last few weeks dissolve into a singular, sharp sense of clarity. The gamble had paid off, leaving her with the breathing room she desperately needed to keep the project moving forward. The runway was secured, but the race never stopped. Sarah pulled her focus from the locked contract and scanned the secondary market dashboard. The demand for hash power was a living, breathing beast, constantly shifting its weight across the global grid. She spotted a critical deficit in her current capacity. If she did not bridge this gap, her lead would evaporate within the week. She typed the parameters into the terminal, her fingers moving with practiced, rhythmic precision. A listing appeared for a block of secondary market hash power. It was expensive, risky, and disappearing in real time. She did not hesitate. Her index finger hovered over the enter key as the spot price flickered on the screen. She hit the command. The interface hung for a heartbeat, a digital vacuum where the world seemed to stop. Then, the status indicator turned from pending to confirmed. The transaction finalized in milliseconds. She has seized the block. A new surge of data began to flow into her servers, visible as a rising green graph on her secondary monitor. She had not just survived, she had outmaneuvered the market at its own speed. The gold rush was no longer about who had the best algorithms, but who could secure the silicon at the exact moment it became available. She had won this round, and the project was surging forward once more. The terminal went dark, the rapid-fire data streams replaced by a single, steady cursor. Sarah let out a breath she had been holding for hours. Her hands were still resting on the edge of the desk. Outside the window, the city lights pulsed in a rhythmic, artificial heartbeat, reflecting the massive power grid that fed the machines behind her. She stood up, her joints aching from the long hours of stillness. The hum of the cooling fans remained constant, a reminder that the data center never slept, never hesitated, and never stopped consuming. She reached out and folded the laptop shut. The click echoed in the quiet space, final and sharp. There was no grand victory, only the quiet understanding that she had bought another day of work. She turned away from the server racks, leaving the machines to their endless, invisible labor. The race for capacity would resume at sunrise, and the market would be waiting, hungry and volatile as ever. She walked toward the exit, the weight of the project still pressing against her. But for now, the game was paused. She was still in the race, still standing, and for this moment, that was enough. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped out into the night.